The envelope was already open when my sister walked into the room. That was the first thing I noticed, the envelope that had been sealed for 11 years. The one my grandmother had pressed into the hands of her attorney the same week she was diagnosed, the one that was never supposed to be touched until the day it was read aloud to the entire family. It was open, and my sister Diana was holding it like it was hers. She walked into the sitting room of my grandmother's house, our grandmother's house, wearing a cream blouse and a smile I had never seen on her face before. Calm, settled, like someone who already knew how the story ended. Behind her came my mother, clutching her purse with both hands the way she always did when she was trying not to look nervous. And beside them, pulling out a chair with the ease of someone who had been invited, was my husband Nathan. The attorney, Mr. Calloway, was already seated at the head of the long oak table. The rest of the family had arranged themselves around it, aunts, uncles, cousins, who had flown in from out of state. Grandmother Ruth had passed 6 weeks ago, quietly, in the bedroom upstairs where she had slept for 43 years. She was 81, and stubborn until the last breath, and she had left behind a house, a property in Vermont, a trust, and according to the letter she had mailed to every family member the year she was diagnosed, a final wish that everything she owned would go to the granddaughter who had stayed. That was me. I had moved back to take care of her when I was 32. 8 years of early mornings and doctor appointments and sleeping with the monitor on. 8 years of watching my sister call twice a year on holidays, and my mother ask every spring whether the house had been appraised recently. 8 years, and everyone in that room knew it. So when Diana sat down across from me and placed that open envelope flat on the table in front of her, I felt something shift in my chest. Not fear exactly, something colder. "I think we should wait for Mr. Calloway to begin," I said. Diana smiled. "Of course." My husband reached over and squeezed my hand. I looked at him. He was looking at the table. Mr. Calloway cleared his throat, adjusted his glasses, and opened his briefcase. He produced a document, the original, the one he had been holding in his office for 11 years, and set it on the table. Then he looked up, and for just a moment, his eyes moved to the open envelope in front of my sister. Something crossed his face. Something careful. "Before we begin," Diana said, "I'd like to present something." The room went quiet. She slid the papers from the open envelope and placed them in the center of the table. "I have here a revised document, signed by Grandmother Ruth 14 months before she passed. In it, she amends her original will to reflect a change in her wishes." Diana folded her hands. She left everything to me. The silence that followed was the kind that has texture. I could hear the clock on the mantel. I could hear my cousin shift in her seat. I could hear my own heartbeat. My aunt spoke first. "What does that mean?" "It means," my mother said, from the chair beside Diana, her voice steady in a way that told me she had rehearsed this, that Ruth had more time to think. She realized that 8 years of obligation isn't the same as love. My throat closed. I turned to Nathan. He was looking at the papers. "You knew," I said. It wasn't a question. I didn't know why I said it right then, in front of everyone, but I said it. He didn't answer. I had met Nathan when I was 34, 2 years into caring for my grandmother. He was thoughtful, patient, the kind of man who remembered small things the way I liked my coffee, the name of my grandmother's cat, the anniversary of my grandfather's death. He had proposed in the garden of this very house, on a Tuesday evening in October, with my grandmother watching from the kitchen window. I had thought, standing there with the ring on my finger and the smell of cut grass in the air, that I was finally steady. That after years of doing everything right and being overlooked for it, I had found someone who saw me. I had been wrong about a lot of things. Mr. Calloway picked up the papers my sister had placed on the table. He studied them for a long moment. Then he set them down, removed his glasses, and looked directly at Diana. "Where did you get this?" he asked. Diana straightened. "From grandmother's personal files. She gave me a copy herself." "That's interesting," Mr. Calloway said, "because I prepared every document Ruth signed in the last decade of her life, and I have never seen this before." My mother leaned forward. "She didn't use you for everything, Gerald." "No," he said. "But the notary stamp on this document belongs to a firm that dissolved in 2019. And Ruth signed this, according to the date, in March of 2022. The room exhaled. Diana's composure cracked, just slightly, just enough. "There must be a clerical error." 3 years after the firm closed, Mr. Calloway said. That would be quite an error. My mother started to speak. She could have had it witnessed somewhere else. The stamp doesn't necessarily. Mom. I said it quietly. Stop. She looked at me. And for a moment, just a moment, something moved behind her eyes that I recognized. Shame. It was there and then it was gone, replaced by that particular expression she had worn my entire life, the one that said I was being difficult. You both knew, I said. I wasn't raising my voice. I didn't need to. How long? Diana set her jaw. You've been holding this family hostage for 8 years, acting like you were the only one who cared about her. Like the rest of us didn't grieve, like your sacrifice entitled you to everything she built. I'm not talking about what I'm entitled to, I said. I'm asking how long you've been planning this. She didn't answer. Nathan's phone buzzed on the table. He turned it face down. I looked at him. Who's texting you? Nobody. Nathan. He picked up the phone. Stood. I need a minute. Sit down, I said, and something in my voice, something that hadn't been there before, made him sit. I had spent 8 years being gentle, being patient, being the one who stayed, and every single person in that room had counted on me continuing to be exactly that. The document is a forgery, Mr. Calloway said. He had produced his own folder now, was laying papers side by side with the methodical calm of a man who had been waiting for this moment. I've done a preliminary comparison, and the signature does not match any of Ruth's authenticated signatures from the same period. The pen pressure is inconsistent. The loop on the R is incorrect. And he paused. This line here, this witness signature, belongs to a man named Gerald Pierce, who is my late colleague, who passed away in 2020. Someone in the back of the room made a sound. It might have been a laugh. It wasn't a kind one. Diana stood up. This is absurd. Sit down, please, Mr. Calloway said. He had the tone of someone who had sat across from enough liars to no longer waste energy on dramatics. And then, the door opened. She came in quietly. A woman I had never seen before, mid-50s, charcoal blazer, hair pulled back, a leather folio tucked under her arm. She walked to the end of the table and set the folio down. She didn't introduce herself right away. She looked at Nathan. He looked at the table. Who are you? My mother demanded. My name is Carol Briggs, the woman said. I'm a forensic document examiner. I was retained 6 weeks ago to investigate a potential case of estate fraud. She opened the folio. Inside were photographs, comparison grids, annotated pages. I've been working this case since before Mrs. Ruth Calloway passed. The room tilted. 6 weeks ago, I heard myself say. She was still alive 6 weeks ago. Yes, Carol said. She retained me herself. The silence that followed was different from the first one. This one had weight. Ruth suspected the document existed, Mr. Calloway said. She called me last summer. She said Diana had asked her to sign something she didn't fully understand. She'd refused. She wanted to know if there was anything in her files that shouldn't be there. My mother made a sound. She was 80 years old. She was confused. She was sharper than anyone in this room, I said. Carol spread the comparison sheets across the table. The forged document was created approximately 9 months ago. The paper was artificially aged using a heat process. The ink is a close match, but under UV light, the degradation pattern is inconsistent with natural aging. She paused. And the phone used to photograph Ruth's authentic signature, the one used as a template for the forgery, was registered to a number belonging to Nathan Marsh. Every head in the room turned. Nathan was very still. That's not, he started. We have the records, Carol said simply. I'm not interested in your explanation right now. I stared at him. The man who had held my hand through my grandmother's worst nights, who had sat across from me at that kitchen table eating soup and talking about nothing for 8 years, who had kissed me on the forehead 3 days ago and told me this would all be over soon. I understood now what he had meant by that. You helped them, I said. It still didn't come out as a question. You photographed her signature. You gave it to Diana. He opened his mouth. Don't. I said. Please don't. He closed it. Diana was looking at Nathan with an expression I hadn't expected. Not triumph, not solidarity. Something closer to fury. You told me you handled it, she said to him. Her voice had dropped. You said there was no way this could be traced. Nathan said nothing. You said the notary was clean. Diana. My mother put a hand on her arm. Diana pulled away. You told me this was airtight. She was shaking now, her careful composure dissolving in real time. You said if she ever checked, the firm was gone, and there was no paper trail. You said, stop talking, Nathan said, low and urgent. You stopped talking, Diana snapped. You promised me this would work. You said she'd never question it, that she was too trusting. She caught herself, but she'd already said it. Too trusting. I had heard that word applied to me before. Sweetly, affectionately. Never like this. Never as a flaw to be exploited. I sat with it for a moment, the specific quality of being trusted by someone who was busy calculating how to use you. The particular loneliness of having your gentleness weaponized. What did you get out of it? I asked Nathan. The house is worth what, 800,000? More? Diana cuts you in? Is that it? He didn't answer. Carol looked at him with the patience of someone who had watched many people decide not to speak. The property in Vermont is valued at approximately 400,000, she said. The house, with current market appraisals, is closer to 900. The trust is liquid, approximately 220,000. It's a considerable estate. She paused. We also found correspondence between Mr. Marsh and your sister going back 14 months. In it, they discussed the property, the forgery, and she glanced down at her notes. The timing of Ruth's death. The room erupted. My uncle stood. Cousins began talking over one another. My aunt put her hand over her mouth. The noise was sudden and enormous, and I sat in the middle of it completely still. They had been waiting, not just for my grandmother to die. They had been watching her decline like a calendar, plotting around her breath. And Nathan, my husband, the man who had held her hand in the hospital, who had cried at her bedside, had been a part of it, had brought his patience and his warmth into this house and pointed them at me like a flashlight to see what was worth taking. I turned to my mother. Did you know about Nathan? She looked away. That was my answer. Did you know he was involved in forging the document? She pressed her lips together. I knew he was helping Diana. I didn't ask the specifics. You didn't ask, I repeated. It wasn't, she stopped. Started again. You have to understand that Diana has struggled. She has never had the opportunities you had. And Ruth always favored you. Always, even before you moved back. And that wasn't fair. It wasn't. So you decided to steal from me. It wasn't stealing. It was correcting an imbalance. I looked at my mother for a long time. I had spent my whole life trying to understand her, trying to be patient with the particular way she loved selectively, competitively, always through comparison. I had told myself it was her own damage showing, that she didn't mean it the way it felt, that she was doing her best. I was done telling myself that. Diana. My sister looked at me. Her eyes were wet. Did you mean any of it? Any of the calls this year, the texts, the when you came to the funeral and held my hand at the grave? Was any of that real? Her jaw worked. Of course it was. And you still did this. I needed, she stopped. Her voice cracked. You always get everything. You always have. And you don't even see it. You just stand there being perfect and patient, and everyone loves you for it, and I'm just. She pressed her hand against her mouth. When she took it away, her voice was steadier, but emptier. I just wanted something that was mine. So you tried to take mine. She had no answer for that. And for the first time since she had walked in with that envelope, she looked like my sister again. Not the composed stranger who had sat across from me with a forged will. Just Diana, smaller, somehow, standing in the ruin of what she had built and realizing, too late, that she was standing in it too. Nathan had not spoken since Carol's revelation. He was very still, the way things get still, right before they break. His phone buzzed again. He ignored it. Who keeps texting you? I asked. It doesn't matter. It matters to me. He looked up, and in his face I saw something I recognized from the last few months, a particular quality of distance, like a man already halfway out the door, just waiting for the right moment to finish leaving. Is there someone else? I asked. The silence was its own answer. I let out a slow breath, not a sob. I wasn't going to cry in this room. Not in front of these people. I had spent 8 years of my life being the one who held things together, and I was not going to fall apart now, in the house my grandmother had trusted me with. Okay, I said. I said it to no one in particular. Okay, Carol spoke. I've already been in contact with the county DA's office. Forgery of a legal document, fraud, conspiracy, these aren't small charges. Given the value of the estate, we're likely looking at felony-level offenses. She looked at Diana, then Nathan, then my mother. I'd suggest all three of you speak with attorneys before saying anything else. My mother made a sound. I haven't done anything. You were aware of the forgery and participated in the plan to present it as legitimate, Carol said. That's conspiracy. She said it the same way she might say anything. Flatly. As fact. My mother sat back in her chair like someone had removed her spine. Diana was crying now. Not the performative kind, the ugly, gasping kind. The kind that comes when the thing you've been holding finally lets go. My mother reached for her. Diana didn't pull away this time, but she didn't lean in either. She just sat there and cried, and my mother held her arm, and neither of them looked at me. Nathan stood up. He didn't say anything. He looked at me once, with an expression I couldn't read, not remorse exactly, but something adjacent to it, something that still had enough self-awareness to be ashamed. And then he walked toward the door. The exits are being monitored, Carol said, without looking up from her folio. The police are already on their way. He stopped, and stood there, with his hand almost on the door, and didn't move. Mr. Calloway, who had been quiet through most of the second half of this, cleared his throat. He looked at me across the long oak table, past the scattered papers and the open envelope and the ruin of what should have been a straightforward morning. Are you all right? He asked. I thought about it. I ran a quick inventory, the tightness in my chest, the particular hollow quality behind my eyes, the way my hands were completely steady, even though I felt like I was standing in the aftermath of an earthquake. Ask me again in a week, I said. He nodded. He seemed to understand. My uncle came and stood beside me. He didn't say anything, just put his hand briefly on my shoulder, and that small gesture, that quiet, uncalculating gesture of solidarity, cracked something loose that I had been holding very tightly for the last hour. I swallowed, kept it together. Outside, the sound of tires on the gravel driveway. A car door, then another. Nathan turned from the door and looked at me one last time. I don't know what he was looking for. Forgiveness, maybe. Or just the version of me he had counted on, the one who would absorb things quietly and carry on. The one who was too trusting, too patient, too easy to mistake for someone who had no limit. I loved you, I said, and I meant it. Even now. That's the worst part. I actually loved you. He flinched. The door opened from the outside. Two officers stepped in, the mundane machinery of consequence rolling quietly into the room. Carol crossed to meet them. My mother made a sound, half protest, half surrender, and then fell silent. Diana had stopped crying. She sat with her hands in her lap, staring at the table, wearing the particular expression of someone who understands, finally, that there is no version of this that ends well for them. I watched Nathan walk out of the room between two officers, still not saying anything, still that particular kind of quiet that comes from having nothing left to offer. I watched my sister stand slowly, my mother's hand falling from her arm. I watched them move toward the door, small and diminished, and I felt not satisfaction, not quite, something simpler, relief. The specific relief of a weight you've been carrying for so long you forgot it was heavy, suddenly lifting. My cousin appeared at my elbow, pressed a glass of water into my hand. I drank it. The room was reconfiguring around me, clusters of conversation, shaking heads, the low hum of family processing shock. Carol came back to the table and began gathering her folio. The original will stands, she said. Ruth made sure of that. The forgery was comprehensive enough to fool a quick review, but it was never going to survive serious scrutiny. She knew that. I think she wanted them to try. I looked up. What do you mean? Carol paused. She contacted me herself. She told me she'd heard Diana on the phone, discussing the property, discussing your husband. She didn't say anything to you because she didn't want to hurt you, until she had proof. She met my eyes. She spent the last 3 months of her life making sure you'd be protected after she was gone. I had to look at the ceiling for a moment. 81 years old and still fighting for me from a hospital bed, still thinking 6 moves ahead. Still, even at the end, looking out for the granddaughter who had come back. I pressed my hand against my mouth and held it there until I could breathe normally. She left you a letter as well, Mr. Calloway said gently. Separate from the will. I was instructed to give it to you privately. He slid a small sealed envelope across the table. My name, in her handwriting. the loops on the letters familiar as a fingerprint. When you're ready. I put it in my pocket. The house was quiet by late afternoon. The family had gone. Mr. Calloway had gone. Carol had gone. The officers had gone with the people who would spend the next months in court, watching their choices calcify into charges. The rooms were exactly as my grandmother had left them, the floral curtains, the books arranged by color, the photograph of her and my grandfather at Niagara Falls in 1974. I sat in her armchair by the window, the one she'd always claimed gave the best light, and I opened the letter. It was 3 paragraphs long. Her handwriting was shakier than I remembered. She must have written it near the end, but every word was deliberate. Every period placed exactly where it meant to be. She told me she was proud of me. She told me that staying had never been about obligation, and she hoped I knew that she had seen the difference. She told me that the house was mine to do with as I chose, sell it, live in it, let it sit. She told me she had named me, not because of years logged or duty fulfilled, but because I was the one who had understood, from the beginning, that love isn't something you announce. It's something you show up for, quietly, on a Tuesday, when no one is keeping score. At the very end, in handwriting slightly steadier than the rest, as if she had steadied herself especially for this line, she wrote, "Don't waste another year being gentle with people who were never gentle with you." I folded the letter, set it on my knee, looked out the window at the yard she had kept for 40 years, the rose bushes, the flagstone path, the bird feeder. She had refilled every morning, right up until she couldn't. I didn't cry. Not the way I had expected to. Not the heaving, falling apart kind of crying I had been bracing for all day. What came instead was quieter. Just tears. Steady and unhurried. The way rain comes when there's no wind. I let them come. I sat in her chair, in her light, holding her words, and I let it all move through me. I had lost a marriage. I had lost my sister, the way you lose someone you realize was never quite who you thought. I had lost a version of my mother I had been hoping for my entire life. But I was sitting in my grandmother's house, in the chair she had saved for the best light, with a letter she had written to make sure I knew I was loved, and for the first time in a very long time, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be.